I think they need to put their partisan hatred aside and focus on actually working for the American people, getting America back to work, helping small businesses. This is going to be just venting the id of the Democrats. And then it's going to end with failure. In order for the president to be convicted, it takes 67 votes in the U.S. Senate. That's not going to happen. Rather than focus on getting kids back in school and getting tens of millions of Americans back to work, the Democrats want a week of just political theater raging at Donald Trump.
And there you have it. Of course, that is a clip of our next guest. Political theater. That's the word he used, which is almost an insult to theater. Honestly, somewhere Ethel Merman is rolling over in her grave, singing Clang, Clang, Clang with the trolley. Our next guest, you can follow him on Twitter for as long as they allow him, at Ted Cruz or at Send Ted Cruz. His podcast is Verdict with Ted Cruz, and his book is One Vote Away, which he hasn't sent us a hard copy yet. Senator Ted Cruz, how are you, sir?
I am doing great, and since you're lacking a hard copy of the book, I'm happy to demo it, and we will send you this copy right here. It is in the mail, along with the check.
Oh, your book is in the mail, so I can expect that to be lost. Do FedEx, please. Let's go the private route, just to be sure. Okay, so, Senator Cruz, we have a lot to get to, and some tough questions, because I promised my audience that we'd be asking Republicans some tough questions here, and you've got some splaining to do, but not a lot. First, let's go.
I haven't been Ricky Ricardo in a long time.
I know, yeah. By the way, threatened to beat his wife mercilessly.
Yeah,
when you
shocking.
watch those old shows, you're like, the good old times. Like, do you have any idea? Do you watch The Honeymooners?
Yeah.
Boom, zoom to the moon. I'm
moon.
going to strike you so hard, you will be in orbit.
Yeah, but nobody on Earth thought that Desi Arnaz could take Lucille Ball. She would kick his tail, and everyone knew that, and so that sort of kept it on a nice even keel.
Yeah, and it was foreshadowing to now the executive action from Joe Biden, where trans males can beat up trans females. So who knows
true.
now?
Hey.
The lines are blurred. The point is,
It's up in the air.
Hands up, chin down. Okay, political theater. Tell people what we're watching here. What do you think about this impeachment trial? I mean, I really do think it's a sham. I think that Donald Trump's defense attorney, the first guy, should walk off a cliff, figuratively. Why is this happening right now? And the constitutionality is your strong suit, but you have both sides. They always have these arguments. Well, the Constitution and says this, and give us the rundown.
So let me take both pieces. Number one, why is it happening? Because Democrats hate the president. They hate Donald Trump. For 4 years, that's been the Democratic Party. It's been defined by this pathological. I mean, there's a reason Trump derangement syndrome is a thing. That's who they are. And so this week, the trial is going to be lots of screaming, lots of pounding on the table, lots of emotional, grasping their ties and like looking with big puppy eyes. And there's going to be lots of videos, really heart-wrenching videos. But at the end of the day, it's doomed to failure. They know that. Every senator in the chamber, all 100 senators, know the outcome of this is going to be that Trump's going to be acquitted. They need 67 votes to convict. That ain't going to happen. There's going to be somewhere around 55 votes to convict, plus or minus one or two, and then it'll be over. And they're going through this not because they actually want to accomplish what they say they're trying to do, but because they just hate the guy. And there's no reasonable argument, I believe, that this meets the standard for impeachment. The standard is high crimes or misdemeanors. Their argument is that Trump incited the violence. Listen, I was here at the Capitol. I was on the Senate floor when the attack occurred. It was a terrorist attack. It was reprehensible. One police officer was murdered. Every one of those violent criminals should be fully prosecuted. But if you look at what Trump said, and listen, I've been among the first to say that Trump's rhetoric was overheated, that it went too far. I wish he hadn't gone as far as he did. But the Democrats' argument is using language like fight and win and take back our country, that is somehow incitement to violence. If that is true, you better be prepared to line up and indict every single political candidate for office who's ever given a stump speech. The local candidate for dog catcher is right now saying we need to fight and win and take back our country from the dogs. This is absurd hypocrisy. They know it. but their anger and rage towards Trump is what's driving it.
Now, that being said, I know you're making light of it, but it's no laughing matter when large swaths of Detroit are controlled by packs of roaming wild dogs. It's a serious elected position, and I don't appreciate your tone there.
I'll just point out that the great state of Texas, where you and I both reside, the legislature changed the law to legalize hog hunting from helicopters.
Yes.
Which may be the
love
coolest.
Texas.
Now, look, hogs are a pestilence and they destroy crops and they do all sorts of damage, but it is still thoroughly badass. And I'm going to admit to you right now, Stephen, that I feel completely incomplete as a person until I actually get up in a helicopter and hunt hogs. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make that happen very, very soon. And I'll let you know when I do. And so, the wolves that have taken over, those can be dealt with too.
Yeah, they can. Well, they're not wolves. They're just actually wild dogs. But that's a perfect example, actually, in Detroit, Michigan, where I spend quite a bit of my time. They had a vote for a wolf hunt in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I don't know how familiar you are, but that's separate by a large body of water. So there are. Yes, the UP, serious people. We have someone from Wisconsin who works here, even Brendan, and he thinks it should be part of Wisconsin, but he's a moron. So they had a vote on a wolf hunt because there was a problem in the UP, and it was voted down. Do you know why? Because a bunch of hipsters in Detroit coffee shops thought it was mean. They're like, well, the wolves keep the coyote population in check. The Upers said, we're more concerned about the wolves than the coyotes right now. And that's a problem, I think, with a lot of politics, where you have Americans who feel their voice doesn't get heard because some people in big cities just, they overrule their vote. Why are people in Detroit voting on a wolf hunt for people in the UP? And that brings us back to the election. Now, you just said, and this is something that I know you've caught some heat for, Donald Trump went too far in his rhetoric. Could you give me some examples? What do you mean by that?
Oh, look, I by the way, that this is not a new sentiment. I think Trump's rhetoric often goes too far. I wish what he said and what he tweets was just ratcheted down a tone or two. I actually think he would have been more effective without all the drama, that there were some unforced errors. Mm-hmm. And so, listen, with regard to the last election, I think the president saying over and over again that the election was stolen, it's overwhelming and completely clear. I actually don't think the evidence backs that up. I think there is serious evidence of voter fraud that needs to be investigated. It's why I stood up on the floor of the Senate and brought together 11 senators calling for an election commission to review the evidence.
Right.
But I think determinations like that ought to be actually based on evidence and facts and not just stating the outcome you want, which is it was stolen because I say so. I think it's much better to have it actually derived from and connected to the facts.
But here's the thing, you know that most of these cases were dismissed, that the evidence wasn't even heard. I mean, the Supreme Court in particular, right, dismissing it on standing. So what does President Trump do? And not just President Trump, but the 70 million Americans who voted for him who are saying, well, hold on, there's no due process here. We've shown irregularities, and we might be banned from social media if we show these irregularities. How do we say it's not based on evidence when I know the standard, we're talking about evidence proven in court, but they haven't heard the evidence. Let me ask you this. Do you believe that you've seen enough evidence to say there have been some serious irregularities and large levels of fraud in the last election?
I think there unquestionably have been serious irregularities. And what we know that the Democrats have done in state by state, what they certainly did was change the rules to benefit them. So the move, for example, to universal mail-in balloting. Let's take a state of Pennsylvania,
right,
where they moved to universal mail-in balloting. It's contrary to the Pennsylvania state constitution. They ignored the law, and they did it because they understand that for a long time, mail-in balloting has been the greatest source of voter fraud, that it is susceptible to ballot harvesting. It's susceptible to things like you take a nursing home. When you have universal mail-in balloting, political operatives can go into a nursing home to a bunch of folks who may not be competent anymore to make determinations and fill out the ballots for them. Mm-hmm. And mail them in. And by the way, if one of the nursing home residents is stubborn and votes the wrong way from the political operative's view, they can just throw their ballot out. And that's a problem. Just a couple of months ago in Texas, a woman was indicted for voter fraud for doing exactly that. Over 100 ballots she went to nursing home residents to fill out. Many of them were not competent, were not capable to understand what they were doing, and she was trying to steal votes. And so mail-in balloting is particularly susceptible. And it's not just me that says that, by the way. There was a bipartisan commission a number of years back. It was chaired by Jimmy Carter and James Baker. It's called the Carter-Baker Commission. Yep. Jimmy Carter is hardly some right-wing kook.
Well, you also have the letter written from Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar to, I believe it was the parent company of Dominion, not saying that it was the ghost of Hugo Chavez who came back to steal the election, but saying, hey, these machines are not secure in the standards that we require for national elections. Signed, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar. So it was okay to say that and post it on social media until recently. Now it's considered treason, I guess, or a high crime.
So listen, what I would say is there is significant evidence that there was meaningful voter fraud that is deeply concerning. And you were right that many of the court cases were decided on procedural grounds. So they didn't get to the merits. They didn't get to the underlying evidence because of procedural barriers. It's why on January 6th, I stood up and led the objection and raised the objection, because I said, listen, there's enough evidence, prima facie evidence on the front, to raise a serious concern. We need to appoint an impartial election commission that can consider the evidence on the merits and make a conclusive determination. I still think that would have been the right path to take. If we'd have done that and reviewed it on the merits, you've got nearly half the country that believes the election was rigged. That's not good for the stability, for confidence in our democracy. I think having a process to conduct a fair audit would have been much better.
Right.
Unfortunately, the Senate didn't agree.
Well, I would argue worse for democracy and the trust of our constituency is potentially elections being rigged or insecure,
Sure,
according to Democrats before this election. And I think that a lot of people feel as though their vote doesn't matter going forward. And that asks me, because they go, well, listen, if this is what happened in the last election, there's over 30 plus million Americans who feel that way, specifically on election fraud. What do you think the future of the Republican Party is? Because I think you have a lot of people who are mad saying you do need to fight like hell, and people are willing to move on and take this on the chin. And I tell you what, for me, because we cross-reference. We have an intern with pictures of today's newspaper in Nevada, addresses that don't exist. We can only go to so many dozens of addresses to show these are not valid addresses. This is a fake vote. We can prove it. I would say it under court under threat, penalty of perjury, because I've seen this myself. I can't say that I've seen everything else. This is what I can claim in court, and no court would admit it as evidence. What's the future of the Republican Party? Do we think there's a place for the Liz Cheneys of the world and the Trump voters of the world?
So listen, I think there should be a place for everyone who's willing to vote to save our country. And I do think efforts actually on either side within the Republican Party to either purge Trump supporters or purge those who are skeptical of the president, I think both of those are mistakes. I want to win. I want to get to 50+1. I want to actually have policies that make sense for our country, that defend our liberties, that protect our free speech and our religious liberty and our Second Amendment. I want those policies in place. And so I think we should be growing the team of supporters. Now, does that mean we give up and stop fighting? Absolutely not. To the contrary, we need to stand up and fight for what I believe in and what you believe in and what all of us believe in. We need to fight seriously and effectively.
And figuratively.
And figuratively, you actually have to clarify that, because when you say fight, I'm not saying
you treasonous bastard.
And this is a battle, an electoral battle that will go on. Defending liberty is not easy. Election fraud is a serious threat. I've spent 20 years fighting voter fraud. When I was Solicitor General of Texas, I led the states defending photo ID laws in the states.
Right.
Voter fraud is a real problem, and we need to fight against it. That being said, I do think you sometimes see Republican politicians who use voter fraud as an excuse. I can tell you my approach when I've been on the ballot is, yes, voter fraud's a problem. We need to fight it and combat it. But for the election coming up right now, here's the simplest answer. Win by a big enough margin that they can't steal it from.
Right.
And I do think from the approach of get the job done, that is important. I'll give you an example where we didn't get the job done, which is the Georgia Senate runoffs on January 5th.
Right.
Now, I went down to Georgia 3 separate times and campaigned on the ground. Those were the most important Senate races of our lifetimes. We lost them both. That is what handed the Senate over to Chuck Schumer. The country is going to go through some horrible policies because we lost those races. What happened in Georgia? All the Democrats showed up. They were angry. They were united. They were invigorated to jam through the socialist policies that they're getting ready to push through. And our guys stayed home. Our guys were depressed. They were demoralized, and they didn't show up. And
well, it's because a lot of them felt like their vote didn't matter. You know, like you just said, win by a large enough margin. You have a lot of people in this country who think that did happen, and they could still steal it. That's what we haven't seen the evidence, but I'm just saying I understand how those people feel. I still think they should go out and vote, but it does, in some ways, for many Americans right now, feel like a hopeless endeavor, and they just don't feel like Republicans are fighting for them enough.
Look, are Republicans fighting enough? No, and that has been a persistent problem. But we can win. We have won. You look at even this election where we won most of the close Senate seats and we gained a bunch of seats in the House of Representatives. But it is about turnout. You know, it reminds me of, John Madden when he was, you play those video games or watch him announcing football, saying things like, if you score more points than the other team, you're going to win the game. Then he said, Tenactin, boom! That's true in politics, too, which is if their voters show up and yours stay home, you're going to lose the election.
But it's not true if it's like a boxing match and the guy keeps punching you in the nuts and the ref doesn't call it, and then you keep trying to keep it above the belt. I think that's what a lot of people feel that right now, even outside of voter fraud, even that Democrats play dirty. I mean, for crying out loud, Senator Ted Cruz, AOC said you tried to have her murdered. That is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Well, by the way, your response, and I know you're going to be nice about it, but let's have something that needs to be commensurate with the accusation. She said that you tried to have her murdered. I can't think of something that could inspire one to violence more than a statement like that. Because if I believed you were actually a murderer, Timothy Oliphant, shaved head hitman, I'd probably get physical with you if I believed it.
Look, she's unhinged. But I don't need to respond in kind. I don't need to scream, you're a terrorist, run away. Like it's just the left has lost their minds. And I actually think it's much more effective to respond with a smile, to respond with humor. I don't take a screaming socialist who believes that like people are trying to have her murdered. I don't take that seriously. I think it's nutty and it's self-parroting. You don't actually have to. I don't think you need to say much other than, well, that's pretty crazy.
Well, you're too reasonable. Here's the problem. You're intelligent. You're too reasonable. And there are a lot of people in the country who aren't. But more importantly, the media doesn't care. After the AOC, it came out that she wasn't there when she was in the was it Cannon building? She was several miles away. Right? We covered this in depth, and the pipe bombs weren't planted anywhere near her, and she kept changing her story. After all this occurred, 2 days later, I was listening to I have an ABC News update in my kind of set to my podcast stuff just because I want to hear what they're saying. On Friday, they said AOC described her harrowing experience at the state capitol, and I thought, they're going to address the controversy now, as though it didn't even happen. So I know that you think and I think she's crazy. We know she's certifiable, but the media doesn't treat it that way, and then it's a drip, drip, drip with enough Americans who absorb it, and they think, Ted Cruz is an attempted murderer.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about it, and the media is utterly complicit. One of the consequences of the last 4 years is the media is broken. That there is not anything. You look at something like CNN, which is, I tell you, 4 years ago, you could see them trying to be journalists. They don't try now. They hate Trump so much that they are raving partisans. Nobody argues the media isn't biased anymore. Nobody in the media argues that. I mean, they are passionate, vicious partisans. And so the AOC thing, of course, and by the way, AOC, the fact that she's unhinged doesn't mean she isn't dangerous.
Right.
Her idea, she's an unmitigated socialist. Her idea is, look, this is a woman who celebrated driving Amazon out of New York and killing 25,000 jobs.
Yeah, with a six-figure average pay.
Who needs jobs? I mean, these people are, the ideas they're putting forward would do enormous damage to our country. And by the way, they're vicious. Part of the reason she's claiming that I tried to have her murdered is this is like Robespierre, the hard left. They want to destroy all their enemies. I mean, they're trying to destroy Donald Trump. Why is this impeachment hearing happening? Because they hate him so much that they figure, let's drive a stake through him. And it's driven by hatred and extremism, and they want to drive a stake through you and me. And they're trying to erase all 75 million Americans who voted for Trump. And right now, the media is fully in on it. Big tech is fully in on it. I mean, this is the Empire Strikes Back, to shift to a different movie reference. I mean, they are right now, we will crush the rebellion.
Was that Darth Vader or was that the Palpatine? I don't know Star Wars.
That was Darth Vader, although I probably need to work on my impressions. You may be safe in the comedy stuff.
I just don't follow nerd lore, but I understand the reference. But here's the thing, Senator Cruz, and I know you're busy.
By the way, I don't entirely believe you. I think you probably have like the Watchmen graphic novel hidden underneath your desk, and you're just you're a recovering nerd pretending to be cool.
No, I've talked about this on the show. I viewed the Watchmen on a flight, and I walked out. That's how much I dislike the Watchmen. I said, can you get that small child, the toddler, to start kicking the TV tray in the back of my chair so it ruins my train of thought here, distracts me. But here's the thing. Now they control 3 branches of government, the left.
Yep.
Republicans, and I remember when you were here, a few months ago, I said 4 years, the biggest issue of our time is big tech, 230.
Yes.
A lot of people Republicans were there, they didn't do anything. What hope do they have now? Now it's open season. It's going to start with Trump and work its way down to all of us.
Look, it is open season. It is profoundly dangerous. All right, in Congress, all the Democrats are opposed to doing anything about big tech. They want them to use their monopoly power to silence and destroy their enemies. So you've got half the Congress that is fully in bed with big tech. You then have half the Republicans that are just scared of doing much of anything. So it's only a handful of us. I mean, I've been leading the fight on big tech for the last several years. I've chaired hearing after hearing after hearing. I've been pressing for action. Here's the real problem. When you've got all the Democrats and half the Republicans on the other side, you don't have the votes to move something through Congress. So I proposed all sorts of things. They ain't going to move because the votes aren't there. So the only hope was the executive branch.
Right.
For 4 years, we had the executive branch. And one of the challenges, look, Trump understood that big tech was a problem. He wanted to do something about it. The rest of his administration couldn't actually effectively execute to do something about it. I can tell you in the last 4 years, on this topic, I have sat down and met repeatedly with President Trump, Vice President Pence, the White House Chief of Staff, the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General for the Antitrust Division, the Chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, the General Counsel of the Federal Trade Commission, every one of them laying out, here are the steps we need to take. And they did bring a lawsuit against Google. That was good.
Right.
But that was focused mostly on commercial and anti-competitive conduct outside of the speech and censorship side. And I could never get the people in the administration executing the policy to get serious about stopping censorship. Trump wanted to, and he'd say, gosh, I wish this would happen, but nobody in his administration was able to be focused and effective and competent and get it done. That's the only way we're going to get it done, is with an executive that is ready to act and knows how to act.
Because you're saying there are too many Republicans in the Senate who wouldn't take part.
Yeah. We don't have the votes in Congress. I'm going to keep pushing.
Well, then how about you co-draft some? How about this? How about you and your guys co-write up some legislation and put it on the table, and let's find out who those 50 Republicans are and vote them out.
So we know who they are. So, for example, the Senate Judiciary Committee, we voted on a bill, I don't know, a month or two ago, to rein in Section 230, provide some scrutiny to big tech. Every single Democrat voted no, and half the Republicans voted no.
All right. I want a list of those names, and I want those people voted out, because that's the biggest issue of our time. I don't consider it winning if those people. I want a big tent. I don't want those namby-pambies. I think that's fair.
Look, it is an existential threat. That being said, and by the way, the Biden administration will do nothing because they're bought and paid for by big tech. Those are their supporters, and they want big tech to be worse. It's not even that they won't rein in big tech. The Biden administration is cheering for tech to be worse.
Right.
So the only answer, frankly, is win the White House and have an executive who understands the danger and is capable and competent and knows how to use the tools of law enforcement to stop the censorship and silence and abuse of power.
Okay, so I know you have to go. We're going to go behind YouTube just for 2 minutes with you real quick, but listen, we know there's probably a chance that you're going to run in the next election. You're a popular Republican, national figure. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Will you make the promise right now that if you run and you win, you will take executive action to make sure that speech is free and open on these platforms who claim to be platforms?
Absolutely, 100%.
All right. I'm going to hold you to that. And if you don't, you run for president. And if I vote for you and you win, I'm going to accuse you of attempted murder. Only it's going to be way more in depth. And I'm going to have receipts. And there's going to be some very large man named Lyle who works for you. Okay. So really quickly.
Well, I will say, if you say murder, you have to, I don't know if you saw the Babylon Bee article that had AOC laying on the ground screaming, murder! Murder! So it does seem to me there need to be a few more W's in murder if you're going to say that.
This is true. All right, really quick, Quarter Black, let's tell YouTube to take a hike because we're going to do a quick rapid fire.